All right, I think we got all the buttons pressed here. Hello, and welcome to the Geek on My Sleeve channel. Today we're doing a in-depth live discussion of Children of Dune, Book 3 in the Dune series by Frank Herbert. More buttons. And I don't know if you noticed, but I've been living under a rock, and it turns out that VTubing is a huge thing. So yeah, I was gonna give it a shot. I did not make this avatar, so I can't take credit for it. I know the background doesn't quite mesh, but yeah.
I think it's pretty cool, and I'm looking forward to playing with it some. Though, yeah, yeah, seems like a pretty deep rabbit hole to go down.
This was pretty simplistically done. It literally just uses your webcam, and then depending on how the 3D model's rendered, it'll have the mouth movements. You can either set it up to sync with your audio input, or you can have it set to view it, so what your camera's picking up. But yeah, you can get pretty intense with the VR hardware.
Right on.
Anyway, for like full body tracking and whatnot. Because like right now I'm waving my arms around, but you can't see it.
Uh, that's unfortunate too because you talk a lot with your hands.
Yeah, maybe I'll do like a Inception side by side.
That would be fun. Um,
Ooh, that would match though too, because then I could be like the future self, Vision, and then I could be like the
uh,
actual one going through it.
the Golden Path, one of the many different strands. Um, yeah. So, Children of Dune. Typically, when we do geek outs, we are able to listen to the book several times, and Pete and I are usually able to discuss it a bit, at least like first impressions, kind of do some little mini geek out sessions leading up into this. And while this book was a reread for myself, first pass for Pete, and yeah, we haven't even talked about it. What'd you think, Pete?
So it was a very backwardsly forward kind of book for me because book one, we're powering up, we're becoming the prophesied child. We have the power to see into the future and to manipulate the empire and the guild and everybody else, and we, you know, lay everything down and we flex and we're awesome. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
going into book two wasn't quite that satisfying. And then coming
I'm with
into
you.
book three, the end of two, we have three essentially prophesied childs where his sister was born in the womb or whatever, however they say it, connected,
Preborn.
and yeah, preborn,
Mm-hmm.
and which is essentially makes her a monster because that's what the Bene Gesserit don't want, but they do want, but they don't want because when you are connected before you have your own personality, there are other personalities that have been inception into the pool have a chance to take over you. And that's where, like, at the end of two, I was thinking we were going to be able to progress and do a lot more, like protect our world more and help our people succeed. But that's where the forward backward bit comes in, that in us being successful, we're actually destroying ourselves. And so eh, I enjoyed it. I was a little disappointed I didn't get any like good Gurney quotes because he did show back up. And then the family reunion was not warm and fuzzy at all, which I didn't expect it to be, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, It's been a while since the first time I read it, but the story progression didn't go the direction I initially thought it would or wanted it to at this point. Um, and I remember kind of trying to bite my lip a bit when we were going through and reading them because I didn't want to spoil it for you, even though I know you're pretty cool with it. Because I wanted you to have the genuine first look at the Dune world experience.
Well,
And go ahead.
sorry, I was gonna say spoilers don't really affect me because there's a difference between a novice explaining it and
Who you calling novice
40
boy?
40 hours of, or I guess not novice, but a
No,
10
I know
minute
what you mean.
description
Yeah,
versus
yeah.
a 40-hour description. It's, oh man, have you seen that artist video where the guy's like, why it takes me so long to do stuff and why people keep rushing me? And he does like the same image in like 10 seconds and like a
Yeah,
minute and like
yeah,
10 minutes and like an hour.
yeah.
Just the extra layers and detail.
Yeah, and that's one of the things you get when you go back and you reread some of these. I know when we get ready for the geek outs, like you're right, like even when somebody gives you the elevator pitch, that's one thing, and then it's another thing to go through and experience the ride for yourself, and then it's another thing to relive it and to relive it.
And then
And
it's another thing to end up where we get, and we just add layers where we're like, but what if? And how
mm-hmm,
about? And they
mm-hmm.
could.
So yeah, I'm with you. Like the first book blew me away. Second book, definitely wasn't the direction I was hoping it would go, but it's necessary. It's good for continuing to build the world, the lore, um, our Muad'dib. Um, I feel like we skipped so much action there, and then we get into book three, and out of the first three, I would do one, three, two. Is that where you would rate them? Rank
Yeah,
them?
one definitely was solid, gave us both the good guys and bad guys perspective,
Mm-hmm.
developed several lovable characters,
Mm-hmm.
and we got to see their inner turmoil as well as their moral compass and just like all the different big major pieces in play.
Yeah, yeah. Would love to know what our fellow geeks think in the comment below. Comments, plural. Uh, Let us know where you rate the books up until this point. Now, the next one, and we're going to come back and just focus on Children of Dune, of course, but the next book is my absolute favorite through and through. It's pretty controversial. People either love or hate book four, but for me, as you can see, the direction we're going at the end of book three, which I kind of want to progress through it. Book four is my absolute favorite, and you either love it or you hate it. Um, but all the books are necessary up until this point. Book three, we pretty much get to see um, the Atreides as legit Fremen, which I thought was kind of a fun perspective, right? Because Paul and Aaliyah kind of become adopted Fremen, but they're not truly bloodline Fremen. Where Leto the second and Ganima through Janie are legit Fremen, and they really instill the Fremen ways that much more. Um, I'm with you. Like I was hoping we would get to see more of Gurney Halleck in this book, and he's supposed to be such a huge character, but he's just he has such a small role and very little screen time in this book, which was kind of disappointing. It really focuses on the twins, which is important, right? Like
Yeah,
they
yeah.
are carrying the torch of prescience and all its glory. Um, we get to see, um, Paul, Muad'Dib's mother, Jessica, come back to Dune, and we get to see Aaliyah as she's kind of taking over Paul Muad'Dib's mantle with like the church and everything. And yeah, the Fremen that went out into the desert to die, spoiler, did not die, right?
I that's kind of how I felt it was going, because with how refined the Fremens were for their still suits and the practices and everything, plus with
Mm-hmm.
his abilities and skill set.
Mm-hmm.
But I really expected a bit more, or more so dramatic, like entrance,
Yeah.
because he
You
does
you
the
do
whole
like the
like,
flash and bang, don't you?
yeah, yeah, and yet again, like, we're disappointing for the fight scenes. Like, I think we killed a
There
couple
was
people.
there was next to none in this book. Um, which for a series that like the Jihad literally killed, where we at like billions of people or something like that. Um, we don't really get to see a whole lot of that on screen. Um,
This is true.
I think you're right. Like we get a handful of deaths on this book, but it's yeah, yeah,
So I kind of figured it was Paul, the prophet or whatever, right off the
preacher.
bat, preacher.
Yeah.
I was like, a little too close. But at the same time,
Surprised, not surprised.
yeah. And I guess it kind of like, between the twins, it really like emphasizes and plays both roles, where eventually the son goes back and picks him up,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then yeah,
And we got to
I
see a
guess it was
little
his
bit of
sister.
that with the interaction too, where how he found him was pretty much he looked for an area that he could not look in a time, and he found like his path in the sand, and that's how Leto was able to find him.
Yeah.
Um, which I appreciate the fact that they explained that aspect of it. Um,
Though I guess I still keep adding more questions with the whole like, does looking into the future let you see the future, or does it bring the future into the present? Does it
mhm,
make it a potential reality? Which is where Paul ended up, where he ended up bringing so much of it over that there was only one path at the end. And
right.
then where his sister went wrong is she overdosed on it, to where she was so open to it, she could essentially communicate with all the, um, I guess, reiterations or connected, however the Benny Gesserit thing works.
Yeah, that I agree, but that wasn't quite my interpretation of it. She had like very limited prescience, and so that's why she was trying to take more of the spice, and trying to like force the prescience. Like she had some limited, but it's not to the same degree that Paul had and Leto has. Um, she wasn't as all-seeing as those two were. She had some limited, but not quite. And if you think about it, initially, the Bene Gesserit wanted Aaliyah to quote unquote be born first. That way, they had the female to breed the Quizarch Haderach, the next generation. So Leto is the next generation, the one that the Bene Gesserit, through their 1,000 years of breeding, were trying to get to, and they're so upset that it's outside their control, and that's where the Bene Gesserit kind of were going to try to manipulate Jessica through Aaliyah, and they want to get their hands on the genes again. So
Yeah.
that was kind of the big play there by the Bene Gesserit. There was either they could get all the 1,000 years of breeding in the genes through Aaliyah, or the twins. And that was where they were kind of talking about early on in the book, breeding the twins together, though there's some risks with that. And yeah, yeah, the powers and the players that be, um, it was really interesting to follow it as it kind of played out, right? Because we get a glimpse of the twins early on, and they're preborn, they awakened in the womb. So they're pretty much have thousands upon thousands of years of experience in these children bodies. And we still have Stilgard, the old Fremen, who is very interesting to see where he ended up compared to when we first met him in the desert. Well, I guess that's not where we first met him. We first met him when he showed up with Duncan Idaho and he spat on the table, giving his body's moisture to the Atreides, to the first Leto.
Yeah.
And then like how far he's come from that to this diplomat, right? He's planted the flag on, dozens of worlds for his Muad'dib. He's now the children's caretaker, and eventually gets pitted against an Atreides, Aaliyah, um, as he goes back and tries to regain kind of his Fremen roots there.
Yeah, and that's kind of the whole paradox I was talking about before, where it's a forward and a backward book, because we were supposed to add water to this planet to make it
Mm-hmm.
not a desert and to have all
Mm-hmm.
of this grassland and pastures and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But we also know that's the only way the makers and the worms and everything work. They can't have
Right.
that kind of environment because that's poison to them.
Yeah, yeah, and that's I haven't read a whole lot about like the Dune lore and the history and everything, but from what I have, that was what was kind of so big and revolutionary about Dune, is just the scale of the storyline and the hard science of following the ecological development there, which is kind of interesting. Yet, yeah, and then yeah, yeah. There's just so much at play there with the spice, and then with Leto and his golden path, and you get a kind of like glimpse a bit as he foresees what's going to happen about how the transformation will continue until eventually there'll only be, I think he says at one point, like 50 of the little makers kept in a preserve, um, until eventually those will pass along, and all will be left is Leto, right? um,
Yeah, but
and his
he's
enforced
every
feet.
iteration,
Explain.
or because like how he has the memories of his father is because he came from it, and
Hmm.
but he also has access to his mother's memories, and
Hmm.
he has access to any of the prior Bene Gesserit voices if he wants, or their thoughts, which is where Aaliyah goes wrong because she's not able to fully control it, and
Yeah,
they're,
yeah.
essentially dead people screaming in her head.
And I appreciate how they explained it. And it's been a minute since I've listened to Children of Dune, though maybe I just paid a little bit more attention this time around. But at the end, Leto kind of exposes the fact that by the Bene Gesserit definition, which I really appreciate the fact that he kind of like pokes fun at like their way of defining things and locking themselves into a certain perspective, and the dangers of that. But he pretty much comes clean that in a way he is an abomination. Um, except for he is more of a collection, and he pretty much picked like a Patreon or whatever to kind of help keep the rabble at bay. So in a way, he is similar to Aaliyah, but not quite. Um, and then Ganima was able to kind of retain her individuality by going through the trance with her mother Janie, and she kind of helped her wall those off and protect themselves. Um, and I just find it like I was thinking about this, and our biggest problem is like we have more content than we have time to create. But I would love to go through and put together like a fun book list if like you were doing a college course of continual learning through sci-fi, fantasy, lit RPG, etc. Because like this book is just so much a philosophy book that kind of makes you stop and think about, what makes you an individual. We are our collected experience, and then to have these children come to consciousness with all these collected experience and memories. Ganima talks about how she's given birth hundreds of times, yet her flesh doesn't know that, but she knows that.
Yeah.
So imagine how hard it would be to hold on to your individuality. Like, what makes you you if there's
Well,
more that's not you, right?
or goes into the whole like information overload bit where
Yeah.
having data is, good because why reinvent the wheel if it's already been done? But at the
Hmm.
same time, you can have information overload, which locks you into indecision. But as Stilgar realized, indecision is a decision.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And
And
oh, go ahead.
just to, a lot of people have a vision, have a direction, but it's hard to determine the outcome or how it will impact others around you or how others will react to it.
Hmm.
So that's where, like, yes, having information is good, but it's not like a basic math problem where it comes out nice and pretty at the other end. It goes through different economical, social,
Sure.
whatever constraints to develop into something new.
Yeah,
So your information isn't always valid, I guess.
and there's like a difference between data and knowledge, right? Like just the raw data doesn't amount to anything, but to have like the knowledge that you can make decisions and utilize is something else. Um, yeah, yeah. And then what did you think about when Leto took Stilgar out into the desert and he tried to warn him, and just kind of like the way he played on his you know uh responsibility, his impulses, like all that stuff. And Leto knew like I can't really push him to this, but just like the way they communicate to kind of guide them to where they want them to go. And then
You said it without understanding, or how do you? Oh man, what was the line? It was like a deja vu moment when he had the same conversation with Paul.
mhm, yeah. And then just like he sets him up and warns him about like if I die, because they projected that they're going to get attacked, and to take Ganima and run into the desert and just like all this stuff. And Stilgar's like, whatever, I'm tripling your guard, I'm going to lock you up, nothing's going to get to you, it's my responsibility, so on and so forth. And then just like his subtle little comments about the women look beautiful this year that kind of put Stilgard going down this rabbit hole, um, to get him to where Leto wants him to go. And
Well, so that's something that is very common in life.
mhm,
It's on a base level, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. But on the next level, you as a manager, you can tell your crew what to do, or you can let them think it's their idea. And if they have some like form of ownership, or they feel like you care about their opinions and they came up with it themselves, they'll be more
sure.
encouraged to do it. So it's kind of like how to guide them
Yeah, yeah,
and how to develop them to think for themselves.
yes, yes. To lead them where they need to go without forcing them.
Yeah,
And it
give
was,
them differing
yeah,
perspectives and whatnot.
between the Bene Gesserit and the Atreides, they have ways with words. And they talk about it. Like sometimes people just get so locked into their own mindset, their own thought process that like you can't force them. You have to kind of like build up that tension and then shock them in order for them to kind of like clear their perspective and then look at the problem differently and then kind of like
Yeah.
have that awakening. Um, and yeah, I think that happens too in day-to-day life as well, where people just get so locked in their own little track, their train of thought that it takes coming in from a different angle to kind of shock them into looking at the perspective in different ways. But anyway, back onto the Children of Dune. Um, yeah, it's pretty much early on. We have everyone come back together, the family reunion, not what we thought it would be. Um, Immediately, Jessica recognizes the fact that Leah's abomination. And then, there's the tension there, the manipulation there. Um, yeah, and Stilgar and Gurney go and kind of like root out um, the I forget how they worded it. Pretty much like the rebels or whatnot for interrogation. Um, and then Jessica starts kind of like examining her grandchildren, right? Trying to see if they are abominations as well. Meeting with Ganima, meeting with Leto, and yeah, yeah,
So we had Gurney and Stilgar. I'm trying to think of the character's name. Aaliyah's husband.
Duncan, Idaho.
Yeah, like we
Yeah,
didn't get a whole lot of Duncan either. At least I don't know. I
it's
felt
true.
like
It's true.
Duncan should have been a more crucial character because we got a lot on like the whole Benny Gesserit Mentat thing, but Duncan being the human computer, forget the word for it.
Oh, human computer Mentat.
Or okay, so is the male and the female side just all considered Benny Gesserit?
So, yeah, that's something that you really learn more about as further into the series.
Because I know it's
So,
all considered the same power, but there's the male and then there's the female half, and the male half can see the female half, but the female
right,
half looks into the void
right,
and
right,
loses their mind. If they,
right.
yeah.
So, the Bene Gesserit are pretty much like a faction or consider it like a school, right? In a
So it's
lot of
like
ways
Jedi
that,
versus Sith, but because they have a school versus the
sure,
other side doesn't have a school yet.
sure, except
And the
for
reality is it's all just a force.
I think it's an apt comparison, but in a lot of ways, yes, like the Bene Gesserit you could consider a Jedi, right? But not all Bene Gesserit are able to tap into their ancestral memories, and that's where they become kind of like the equivalent to the Fremen's reverent mothers, because like the reverent mothers of the Fremen have the same abilities, but they're not Bene Gesserit, right? Bene
Well,
Gesserit go through extreme training from an early age. A lot of times they don't know their lineage, they don't know their parentage, as we see through Jessica, and they basically get educated at a very early age in all the different ways of like controlling their body, controlling their voice. You got to see it a bit with oh, brain fart. Um, the prince. Um, I had it pulled up. The one that Ganima ends up marrying in the end, who ends up becoming Hawk Aladar or whatever. You see the different training that they go through, and the Bene Gesserits, they go through all that
oh, when
training.
yeah, she's training him.
That way, they have all this self-control, the fighting skills, as well as like the politics, because like as we learn in book one, as Paul kind of guesses what Bene Gesserit do, they're in the business of politics, right? Like they think of themselves as like kingmakers, um, selling or giving the major houses Bene Gesserits who have all these skills. Um, and then like, yeah. So then to have access to the ancestral memories, they need to have access to the spice, which is the same thing that the guild uses. So like, um, if the Bene Gesserit are Jedi, then up until Paul, there's no one that could access the male half
Hmm.
of the lineage. In fact, like they talked about a lot of the different problems there, and the failed attempts.
Well, but
And
that's what gets weird because I'm sorry, I can't remember the guy's name, but book one, the big guy who, or maybe it's two. Anyway, the big guy who has to use like, oh, he's so fat, he needs to lift thingies just to walk around,
hmm,
and he's always eating,
yeah.
and we try
That's
to
book
kill him,
one. Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, who ends
takes
up
over
being, yeah, with Aaliyah.
Aaliyah.
Hmm.
So how did he take over Aaliyah if Paul was the first one, but then that guy was dealing with the spice and couldn't access the ancestral memories, but somehow got absorbed into the void of ancestral memories with
Sure.
enough control and power to. Is this one of those like, gotcha, it's all I? Or.
No, it's yeah, that's a good question because the females are only supposed to be able to access, but she is one of the exceptions because she has limited access, I believe. But she is also pre-born, which I think is also different.
Yeah, but then
Um,
how did that guy end up in there at all? Because I don't even think he came. Well, he didn't
well,
come down to Dune, but he was a guild spicer. So
no,
we
no,
had.
no, 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 no. The guy, Vladimir Harkonnen, who pretty much toppled House Atreides, he's in there because it's all based off the genes up until the point of conception for them. So, like with Paul, he has access to Jessica's memories up until the point of conception because that's
Hmm.
stored within the genes, right? So, um, Paul and Aaliyah have access to Vladimir Harkington because he is the father of Jessica. And Jessica is the mother of Paul and Aaliyah. So through the genes up until the point of
Okay, that
conception and
makes
up
it.
until that point, that's how they have access. Just like the twins have access through the Fremen memories and everything through their genes through Janie, unlike Paul wouldn't have any access to Fremen memories unless they were somehow within the genes. But the
See, I was thinking it
twins,
was going through the power.
the power is the ability to access their ancestral memories and unlock the prescience, which the Bene
So,
Gesserit don't have access to prescience. Only the Aaliyah
reborn.
limitedly, yeah, to a limited extent. Paul does, Leto does, and then like we really don't see it through Ganima. I don't think she does, but she has an attempt the spice orgy,
Yeah.
which I think is what helped unlock it for again Aaliyah. But it's limited, which is why she kept attempting more and more and more, and then giving up herself to abomination as defined by the Bene Gesserit.
Yeah. Being possessed.
Yeah. Dune, like, there's just so much that goes on in these books. Like, it took me several, several passes, and I even had to slow it down for Children of Dune. I usually rock out at like 2.5, sometimes 3 speed. But for earlier on in this book, I had to slow it down to like 2.25 to 2x, because it's just so dense of information and there's just like so many moving parts going on in this book. And that's why a lot of people, I think, get turned off by the series. So,
So there's like you said, it's very much a philosophical book for
mhm,
consequences of your actions, dealing with big groups, and how, religion and pretty much sticking with the way things are because they are versus how to, yeah, church and state separation kind of deal where it's like a religious view versus a political view, and then what happens
sure,
when you smash them together. You
sure.
gotta then later go and break them apart, and yeah.
Yeah. There's so much in this book, and there's a lot to be said about charismatic leaders too, and leadership and control, and just all these pieces. Um, so yeah, and then we get to that point where the tigers finally, quote unquote, kill the twins. Geneva goes into a trance, works her way back, and Leto goes out into the desert, right, to pursue his golden path.
Now, for him, like, we're finally powering up. After book one, I thought we were gonna really bring the smackdown, but then we were just like, oh, political stuff. Yes, this stuff happened. And then, yeah, I was excited. We had twins, both with the power, and they were like, no, we can't do it because we don't want to get lost. And finally, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, for me, like, I understand why it was necessary, but kind of those middle chapters there kind of felt like a lull when they kept drugging Leto to see if he would become Abomination. And he played the word games with oh, I forget his name, but basically when he goes to the abandoned legend place out in the desert.
Oh, was
Oh,
that Gurney? No.
well, Gurney was
Stilgar?
there. No, it wasn't Stilgar. Gurney was there doing Jessica's bidding, but then it was like Maldry or something like that. The Fremen that was supposed to keep testing him and potentially kill him.
Yeah.
Jessica had him team up with the smugglers as they were like smuggling the worms off of Dune, even though they weren't taking there. Um, and then the feels of Aaliyah's betrayal on Duncan and Duncan always being the true, loyal follower of Atreides and taking Jessica to House Carino to end up training him, um, which I thought was interesting. Getting to see the kind of like the fallen emperor's family and the politics there, seeing what happened to the once proud um, Sardaukar, because we
Yeah.
kind of get like snapshots in book two, but book three we really get to spend time with them, which is nice and very crucial for going into book four, like having that glimpse, because now you have like um what was Paul's wife's name? Drawing a
Or
blank there.
Janie?
No, well, that's his consort. Um, in
Oh,
in
yeah.
in every way, she actually is his wife, but he marries the daughter of the emperor to get the throne. Um, it'll come back to me. But anyway, so like the two bloodlines there don't match up, but you have Ganima and Hak al-Adar marry, and that's now you have all these great houses and the Fremen going into the bloodline, because Leto at the end of book three, he's no longer human. He's entered into the metamorphosis of becoming a worm, right? And as he foreshadows in book three, pretty much going to be the last worm of Dune as the cycle continues. Um, and we get to
Man.
see as he goes to a CH, flexes his awesome power and says like, "Hey, you're going to start hoarding this spice. This is going to become
My
where I build my
refuge.
throne. Now let me go out and terrorize the rest of Dune, Arrakis." And yeah,
Yeah, that was pretty snazzy how he powered up.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you were only able to get through this book once, right?
Yeah, and like
Yeah.
you said, there was a lot of moving parts. I don't do super well
There's
with name without
there's
putting a
so
full
much in
character
there.
to it.
What do you remember of what he said his golden path is going to be? Because we get some glimpses. We get some glimpses when he
I
finally
remember
meets up
him
with Paul.
talking to Paul about it, and Paul essentially saying, like, you think I'm weak because I didn't take your path. And he
Mm-hmm.
goes back and he's like, well, you did some good, you did some bad.
Mm-hmm.
Now I understand why you did it, but
Mm-hmm.
now I need to do this.
Yeah. I'm going to try to make sure I don't um, spoil anything moving forward. But from what I remember him talking about in his golden path is he's going to give them peace, right? He's going to give them stagnation like they've never seen before, because he's kind of battling back and forth over who's going to manage the prescience with Paul. And Paul's like very, very cautious, like didn't want to go down his path, but Leto pretty much forces his hand and takes over the reins, and does what he says like Paul will not do. And he talks about how, since the metamorphosis of Dune is going to continue, spice production is going to slow, right? Which the
Yeah,
Bene
the water
Gesserit,
kills off the worms.
mhm, the Bene Gesserit, the Spacing Guild, and all of the economies rely on spice, right? Like things aren't backed by gold, they're backed by spice. And he talks about how he's going to take over and become the emperor, and he's going to give them peace, and he's going to give them stagnation. He's
Well,
going to
and
lead
that's
them
what
to
yet
Krylizek,
again is
right?
just so forwardly backwards and backwardsly forwards. Like we
Yeah.
had that. Paul had that. We were Mac Daddy numero uno. I had it. And then we got caught up in politics
He did, but he didn't,
and he didn't
right?
go Super Saiyan. He wasn't jumping off of cliffs and, mind beaming the worms or nothing, but Yeah.
he did what he didn't, and like looking back between book one and book two with Paul Atreides, I really got the feeling like he was doing everything he could to prevent the jihad. Like he got himself locked into this mindset where he was doing damage control, right?
Yeah.
Like even in book two with Janie, like he's looking down these precedent paths and he's like, okay, do I want my woman to be tortured in a slave pit and like all this other stuff? No. Like, do I want this to happen? No. Like he's going and he's like constantly picking the lesser evils and locking himself into this prescience. And we see it through Aaliyah and we see it through the twins where they're just like, oh my gosh, why do you do this? Like he's doing damage control, like the lesser of evils. Where Leto is just like, um, I'm your daddy. I know what's best. I'm going to take us down this path, and you guys are going to be better for it.
Yeah. The rest of you
And,
sink or swim.
yeah, you think the Bene Gesserit can look long term? You think they can plan over thousands of years? Well, I'm going to be the ultimate puppet master, going to be God Emperor, going to take over, my father's religion and et cetera, et cetera. And like, I'm going to live for thousands of years and make humanity stagnant. And I'm going to give them peace. Like they've been constantly warring, they've been constantly fighting, like the jihad
But
killed
wasn't
billions of people. I'm going to give them peace because you know what? There's not going to be spice to travel. There's not going to be spice to do this stuff because the worms are going to die.
yeah. Which yet again, like, doesn't he start destroying the water collectors or the irrigation systems that are supposed to help kill the worms?
Yes,
But
yes,
then,
but the process has already started. So, like it
okay, he's just
sets
slowing it
them.
down to fit his timeline.
Yeah, yeah, and I think he was also doing it just to kind of stir the pot and escalate the tensions there. Between the old traditional Fremen, because we have one of Paul's I forget the terminology they use right now, but it was pretty much like the Fedaykin that goes and pleads to Jessica when Aaliyah tries to have her assassinated, and we kind of have that like epic, there was your fight scene for the book when her and the Fedaykin, when Jessica and the Fedaykin and the other loyal to Muad'Dib's mother help them fight their way out from Aaliyah's control there. Um, they're concerned about the desert. There's the desire to go back to the old ways, and then you have the religion, the church, which is Aaliyah, trying to control everything, embracing the new way. And Aaliyah knows that they're racing towards elimination of the spice.
Yeah.
Um,
And then
so
in the
yeah.
beginning, doesn't it talk about how, like, how, brain fart, I'm gonna say no decision is a decision? They
Hmm.
reiterate it a couple times. Like, I want to
Hmm.
say at the beginning, not seeing a path is choosing a path. And then you get it again
Yes.
with Gurney and Paul's son, where he's like, "You
Yes.
said it," and then at the end where he's like, "I just need to do this,"
Yes. Yes. Yes.
which I think it should be said a little different. Actually, it should be said like, it doesn't matter what happens; it matters what you do about it, kind of deal.
Yeah.
Because currently you can't just stop existing, so you're being acted upon, and then how you react.
Hmm. Hmm. Hey, live on through ancestral memories. The spice must flow. Um, yeah.
But that's still like, I know the series goes on further, but our goals in theory, can't be achieved, or they're going to take several books to do it, and we're going to go all, Dragon Ball Z and spend 5 episodes powering up.
Yeah. Well,
And I get it. There's a lot of factors, but like you were
minor
saying,
spoilers.
everyone's.
You would see it on the back of the cover, but for book 4, we get a several thousand-year time hop,
Oh, damn.
right?
But
Right?
can't they change their molecular structure and live forever, essentially? And that's why.
The Bene Gesserit can, um, and I believe that Leto also has that capability through ancestral memory, but he's no longer human. He has taken on the body of the worm. And the worms, they live long time, so we know that at the beginning, in the early books, and they just continue to grow and grow and grow.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So
And we get our first race change of the book.
yes, well, I mean, we had the Golas
Yeah, I guess that's
reborn,
true.
but yes, like extreme race change, no longer human. And now Emperor. Like, how does that work? Explain that one to me. Emperor of those of a different
That
species.
is essentially Jabba the Hutt,
In a
you
lot
know?
of ways, if we're keeping to the Star Wars reference, you can think of him as Jabba the Hutt in a lot of ways, except for a heck of a lot bigger and more wormy than sluggy.
Yeah, well, but, he's ruled by an iron fist mentality.
hmm hmm Yeah, yeah, and in a lot of ways, and that's the way he talks about it. At the end of the book, we don't get to see it, but he pretty much goes and lets them poison him, scorch him with fire, like attack him. Like, your knives cannot touch me, your fire cannot burn me, your poisons cannot, kill me. Like, all bow before
Yep.
Leto the second.
Get
Yeah.
that flex.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And he has the hundreds upon hundreds of the tribes come and pledge their loyalty to them. Um, so yeah, yeah. We like to do it. Who do you feel the MVP was for
I'd
Children of
have to
Dune?
be the son there.
Yeah.
Because, like, the mother coming back and bringing Gurney and all that, I wanted so much more from it, and she was critical in figuring out that Aaliyah had been taken over, and Leto and her when they have the conversation, and
Mm-hmm.
how in the first book she's like, I live to serve, but then coming into the third book here, she's like, trying not to serve them, but serve them. And then you get that whole moment where, like, underlying, compulsions end up rearing their ugly head. So she
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a whole lot of help.
She was also
Aaliyah,
serving multiple masters at that point.
or what's up?
She was also serving multiple masters, right? Like, in a
Yeah.
way, she went back to the Bene Gesserit, and she kind of went back wholeheartedly, but she didn't go back wholeheartedly because she's still serving her own purposes.
And
Um,
she's dealing with training the Mentat, or,
Not the
not
Mentat.
Gurney, Duncan.
Book 3,
Or isn't? Or who's she training?
Jessica. No, she's
Yeah.
training Ganima's betrothed, Hawk Aladar, the
Oh,
previous emperor's grandson.
okay. So they're still making a power play for the throne.
Yeah, that's why
Which
they
that's
did the
one thing that
tigers.
kind of irked me, because, like, the end of 2, we were Paul, we were the Empire or Emperor,
hmm
and the Mac Daddy, and then everybody dies, kids are born, and we just walk off into the sunset. Who picked up the mantle? Like, everybody was just fine with this.
Aaliyah did. She was Atreides, and now the head of the church, or she was already the head of the church, but like,
Oh, because the church and the empire were smashed together, she
mm-hmm,
got it.
mm-hmm.
Okay, I guess that makes sense.
And again, like this book is also really good about showing what happens when you know, church and state become one and mix religion and law and all
And then
that
that's
fun
when Paul
stuff.
comes back and starts prophesizing or whatever.
Preaching. Hmm. Hmm. So for me, uh, I think Stilgar is a close second on the
Yeah.
MVP. He really made a lot of key moves and important moves to keep everything going. Like he played the peacekeeper, neutral ground, to keep people safe partway through the book. Like he did what he could to be loyal to Muad'dib and take care of the kids while still respecting Aaliyah and Jessica. Like he maneuvered all those powers that be so well. Close second. For me, the MVP is Duncan. So he was able to recognize that Aaliyah was not herself, right? And as
Yeah.
Aaliyah was trying to manipulate him into eliminating Jessica, he managed to walk that tightrope, fool her, and still not like betray that he knew. And I really like appreciate
Yeah, he
how
well,
Frank Herbert like articulated how he did that, kind of going into that mentat state strategically where he's all void of emotion and just kind of like doing what he needs to do to compute, and give her the answers that she needs. So he was able to kind of like dance that line there. Go ahead.
but then that brings up the whole like the reason he did part of that was so that if a truth sayer was to talk to her, she could honestly say that she didn't do it, but
That's the
I
answer he
don't
gave her.
we don't run
Bec-
into a whole lot of truth sayers,
mm,
do we? Or maybe it's just one of those like
so this is another thing that it took me a while to really grasp. And you hear Paul say it when he's talking to Gurney that anyone could be a truth sayer, but they're typically like really well trained and like of the school of the Bene Gesserit. So of the truth sayers we know,
we
most of
don't
them have
have
been Bene Gesserit. We
any Benny Gesserit here because this is
Yeah, we haven't been exposed to them, but they were talking about going after Jessica, who has gone back to the Bene Gesserit. So
okay,
Duncan
yeah,
Idaho was pretty much using that to say, hey, if the Bene Gesserit send a truth sayer to ask you where I take her or what I did with her, you could fool them by, even though you could maybe guess, you wouldn't know, right? And he
yeah,
did that to kind of imply that he was going to get rid of her, letting her jump to that conclusion on her own. But he was doing it that way he wouldn't have to tell her where he was going to take her. And it was also his way of trying to see like how she reacted, and that's where he was able to kind of read on her expressions that she would prefer him just to eliminate Jessica, but he didn't. Um, and so like that first reason why I think he's the MVP. Second reason why I think he's the MVP is he's able to meet up with Jessica after she escapes, even though he is the husband of Jessica's daughter who tried to kill her, still convince her. Granted, Leto kind of prompted her, saying, hey, when you're going to be abducted, let yourself. So there was that, but he was able to convince her to trust him enough for him to pretty much trap her in the sugar wire in the helicopter. Um, that like this is pretty much the elite of the elite when it comes to Benny Gesserit, right? Jessica, who's also adopted the Fremen ways, fighter, weirding way, etc., etc. Like he's able to do that, take her to House Carino um, through the preacher's promptings to train uh, the old emperor's grandson. He then also manipulates the situation to where like he like helps set Jessica up with House Carino there when they know they're being spied upon. And then like his final act is as he as a mentat is trying to get Stilgar to do what he needs to do, he talks to him all night long, can't convince him, right? Can't convince him at all. So he takes it upon himself to push Stilgar to the point where he has no options left, right?
Oh yeah,
Like
ends up killing that guy.
Stilgar's supposed to be on neutral ground where there's no bloodshed, and that's like part of his big argument. And as the priest who was sleeping with Duncan's wife comes in, Duncan just murks him, right?
Yep.
Like before anybody can even do anything, he's got a knife in the chest and he's dead. And Stilgar's like, "Oh f, so much for my neutral ground." And then Duncan goes, "One, two, three strikes. Let me offend you. Um, put blood on your floor. Pee in your Fremen cornflakes. Turn my back on you. Drive you into a rage," to where he then murders him. And
Yeah.
so now Stilgard can only he has no options, right? Like, and he pretty much realizes that, like, after his
But he
rage
was kind of on the
subsides.
fence between staying with the Fremen ways and adopting the new ways
Oh, yeah,
throughout the book, at least.
yeah. But his loyalty was to like his people in Ganima. And so then like he's pretty much like, "Hey, it's time for us to go out into the desert." And by pitting Stilgard against Aaliyah, um, yeah, like it pretty much sets up that turmoil there, keeping everything unsettled, that at the end of the day ends up helping Leto to continue to manipulate the situation and get to the golden path, right? Because Aaliyah's focus is then split amongst so many different things. So that's my 2 cents. As always, guys, let us know who you think the MVP of Children of Dune is down below. And as always, it's hard to do these epic books complete justice in, the hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours when we're really going ham. You just can't stop checking yourself out there, Pete.
I was gonna say it's this one's mapped pretty well. Anyway,
Yeah. Um, yeah. What else didn't we hit before we move into the final chapter? What else do you want to talk
we
about in Children
hit
of Dune?
quite a bit, and you clarified a couple things that I was a little confused on, but I did only get through the book once,
I
which
was
is
about to say,
pretty sad for me, to be honest.
I've completely gone through this series at least a dozen times. Like every 6 months, I come back to this series to get my dose of Frank Herbert philosophy, um, and so I can channel the Atreides, Bene Gesserit, Mentat way when I need to. Um,
Yeah, but I'm excited about the next one because you ranked it pretty high. You
uh,
said it was your favorite of the
it's
series.
it's my favorite of the series and probably one of my top 10 sci-fi, which for some people doesn't sound really high up there, but when you have over 500 plus audiobooks, primarily sci-fi fantasy, That's a lot. Um, so yeah, maybe even top 5. And I know that's setting the bar really high, which isn't good to do. And it's one of the most controversial books. A lot of people hate book 4. For me, I thoroughly enjoy it. For
Do
those
we
of
get
you, oh, go
any
ahead.
big fight scenes?
Hmm, some, yeah, we get more fight scenes. We get
Okay.
more fight scenes. Um, and believe it or not, we still get some of our favorite characters in there, even though we go a couple thousand years, which kind of makes you ponder. Um, and yeah, the golden path.
So, random side note, Bobaverse
Uh-huh.
is essentially what we're doing here, but what we're doing here is seen as a bad thing because Leto has all the ancestral memories of everyone before him, and they're all like, "Oh no, they're gonna take over. Oh no, I have too many voices in my head and I can't keep them straight." Meanwhile, Bobaverse, another epic series, goes and it's like, "I'm a clone. I'm gonna do this
Uh,
now." Anyway,
perhaps I'm just like too much in the philosophy mindset, but like what is bad? What is like it's all subjective because like Leto and Paul duke it out and you get to see that fear from Paul about the golden path that Leto is pursuing. And Paul, who we love and enjoy so much in these books and come to respect, um, in these books, like doesn't want him to go down this path. Yet Leto wants to go down this path. And he argues that I'm giving them peace. You know, they will know peace for thousands of years.
well, yeah, it's kind of back to the whole like
But
Paul was in
how
React
could peace
mode.
be bad? Um, you know, like he's going to take away their ability to explore the stars and to travel and make them stagnant. But there will be peace. It may be
Well,
enforced peace,
I think at
and
the end of the day, you can't make everybody happy,
this is true.
which
This is
is
true. And if you
yet
are, you're
again
just boring.
very forward and backwards of everything. But yeah, it, too big, too many things going on.
Yes, yes. Highly recommend listening to it again before you start on God Emperor of Dune. So when we get to God Emperor of Dune next month, going to do a refresher on all these guys. Maybe we'll find a couple hours in the day to do some summary recaps for this series. That way, everybody can just hit play on those and be caught up with us as we geek out on this in December. Um, but yeah, final thoughts or time to talk about? Oh, there
Oh,
we go. Speaking of the Bobaverse, we
yeah.
have Wabam, Singularity Trap by Dennis E. Taylor. Same author of the Bobaverse, borrows a lot of Bobaverse like concepts, but this is a standalone. Pretty much, we are well into the future. Humanity is kind of stagnant. We follow the main character who joins this mining vessel to try to get ahead in life and provide for his wife and children at home and blah blah blah, no spoilers.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
a lot of fun. This one is going to be same time, same place, 8 p.m. Eastern. Going to give everybody who's hanging out with us now, because you know the bulk of our regulars are here. The following Sunday, we are going to
Oh,
be at 5 p.m. Eastern. It's all right, Pete, if you don't have the graphics ready, throwing you for a loop here. But we're going to
or I
go,
can do this.
there
Ba-bow,
we go, spend
which is
time
kind of, but
on
not really.
one
So we
of
just did
our
Dune.
Yep, just did Dune. Next Sunday, The Singularity Trap, 8 p.m. Eastern. The following Sunday, Geek Out number 50, The Golden Compass. Probably one of my first gateways into fantasy, like real adult fantasy, though I guess it's argued that it's kind of borders with YA fantasy. I don't think so. Um, but yeah, that's going to be at 5 p.m. Eastern. And then tentatively back at our normal time for Rhythm of War, which I'm super excited about. We have some potentials to hang out with us for the Golden Compass and Rhythm of War. But as always, if you guys want to geek out with us in the live stream, we would love to have you. Part of the reason why we jumped on board with the StreamYard software, it makes it so easy. And I think we get up to 8, maybe 10 people on here
I'm
uh,
not sure, and
geeking
we've not
out,
really stressed it, but super
talking about
easy.
books. We've gone up to 5 on the live stream.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Yeah. Woo. Golden Compass. Yeah, buddy. Um,
And so quick little sidestep or side note for the Golden Compass. I was very confused when I was trying to figure it all out because I know the Golden Compass has a movie. I
mhm,
know the Golden Compass is part of the new HBO series, but the original author, I forget where he's from. He's a foreign author, and his first book is actually not called the Golden Compass. It was just brought over NA and called the Golden Compass. So things are
mm,
weird there, but I guess the point I'm getting to is book one, The Golden Compass of his, oh, what
Dark
is it?
Materials.
Or his Dark Materials
Yeah. Yeah.
is equivalent with the movie, but it's a book to movie adaptation. And then for the
Mm,
HBO series, it is the whole 3 books smashed together is supposed to be for the 2 series they're releasing.
so the movie, from what I remember about it, no, don't waste your time. The HBO series, I've gotten through, I want to say the whole first season. Definitely a lot better adaptation, lot of amazing actors in it. Need to find somebody's HBO credentials to check that out because I think
Well,
they're
my
starting
only
to add
thing
more.
is how far you need to go to just encompass book one. Because the little bit I read, the series is supposed to encompass the whole book series.
Mm,
So it's supposed to be book one, two, and three smashed together.
okay,
Just
okay,
that way you can watch relative information.
yeah, yeah. I believe this is in regards to the name of the
Oh,
title.
yeah,
So,
Northern Lights in Britain is the actual original name.
which thinking about it makes sense off of the book. Probably about 6 months ago, might have even been longer than that now. Maybe it was a year ago. I listened to the audiobooks again. Love them. A lot of fun coming back to them as an adult. It's always interesting to reread and re-listen to books at different points in your life to see kind of like what you take away from it. Um, but yeah, yeah. HBO series, amazing, definitely worth checking out. Again, we have so much content that we just need to get through, and I need to work on helping Pete with the video editing. That way we could just bust some of these out. Eventually, I would love to go through and analyze the HBO series compared to the books series.
And there's a lot of things
Maybe,
we want to do.
yeah, yeah, you guys, just yeah, yeah.
And this is what comes of wanting to do a lot of things. I am a beepity beep dragonborn on
Uh,
stream.
on
That was
stream.
how productive my week was. Didn't do
Uh,
any of those things I wanted to
that's
do,
not true.
but
That's not true. You got a lot of video editing done.
yeah,
So
yeah.
watch for our spoiler-free reviews to come out next week. We already got those done and in the pipeline. We're here. We're back. We're back on schedule. We're going to get to all those awesome epic videos, and we're here every Sunday to geek out with you guys. And we hope you'll join us again next week. And yeah, hope to geek out with you
Bye.
guys here soon. Bye.